Hey everyone, this is writing micro lesson number 2 for Honors 111 in the Civilization sequence of the Honors College at the University of Maine, and I'm the instructor, Rob Glover. So in your last micro lesson, we talked about idea generation, situating your own ideas in relation to others, and we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about argumentative writing in this micro lesson. So in argumentative writing, you're framing your own ideas and you're answering questions or making claims with recourse to evidence of some kind, right? So the image that you have here, can you prove it? Imagine making a claim and it's an arguable claim. It's something that your reader, it's not common sense to them, or they might even disagree. And so you're going to have to present evidence to convince them. So in this course, a lot of the evidence that you'll be using will be textual evidence from the text that we read in the course. You may also find yourself using evidence from outside sources if you're making a claim that has some contemporary or historical relevance. It's not in relation to the text itself, but to a point or a question or an argument in relation to some other thing happening in society. And in general, you acknowledge that there are other ways of thinking about a question, of answering a question. There's alternative points of view on the topic that you're writing about, but you want to zero in your focus and really defend that claim that you're making. So other ideas are out there, there's other perspectives, you note them, but then your key kind of focus is defending your own claim. So a very important part of that, arguably the most important part of argumentative writing, is the thesis statement. So the thesis statement, I like to use the metaphor of a journey, a destination. So imagine that you are on campus and you see your friend and they're in their car and they say, go ahead, get in the car. And you get in the car. And the very first question that you would ask your friend is, where are we going? And if they didn't tell you, you would be at best, annoyed or frustrated. And you might even start to panic a little bit. Like, what is going on here? Why don't I know what the destination is? And in writing, the thesis statement is kind of like that. It is a statement that signals to your reader your intellectual destination. This is where we're going. You're going to invest a little bit of time and energy in reading what I have to say, but I promise I'm taking you to a destination. In writing that doesn't have a clear thesis statement, in writing in which it is not clear what the objective of the writer is, that can be frustrating for a reader. Maybe the reader even gives up and says, I don't know what this person is talking about or why they're writing and why I should keep reading. So the thesis statement is a really important signal to the reader, first and foremost. In analytical and argumentative writing, a thesis statement typically appears at the close of the introductory paragraph. So you don't want your reader to have to wade a page and a half into an essay in order to figure out what the thesis statement is. In general, you have a short introduction that just kind of contextualizes the topic for the reader, and then you close with some claim or argument that you're going to make. And the thesis statement very simply presents the main point or argument of the essay in argumentative writing. So that's going to be supported with evidence throughout the course of the paper. Evidence can be a lot of different things, right? But the idea is that you present an argument, you present a claim, and then the body of the paper is devoted to presenting evidence to convince your reader of that claim. So for you, for your reader, the thesis statement is going to inform them of that intellectual destination. Where are you going? What is the point? And then for you, the thesis statement helps keep you on track. So even for a shorter paper, sometimes it's easy to start in one place with a certain intention and then end up in a different place. And certainly for longer papers, research papers or more lengthy argumentative essays, it's very easy to kind of end up in a different place than you set out to originally end up. And the thesis statement can help keep you on track. If you have a clear thesis statement that provides direction, it's less likely that at the end of the essay, when you read it over, you realize, oh, I've done something very different than I said I was going to do initially. So it's important both for the reader and for you. There's some components of a quality thesis statement, and this is what I'm going to be looking for in your initial essays this week. So the first is that it's concise and specific. In general, you want it to be a single sentence, and you want it to be a pretty direct sentence. You don't want to add in a lot of flowery language. You don't want the reader to have to look it over 2 or 3 times in order to figure out what is actually being said there. Direct, to the point, straightforward, right? There's other places in which it makes total sense to be more flowery and have lengthier sentences, but the thesis statement, you want to be short so it really jumps out at the reader, and very specific in what it sets out to do, right? And I'll provide some examples in just a little bit. It should also be something that's arguable. So it's not really going to excite your reader if the thesis statement, the thing that you want to defend or claim, is something that is so obvious and so common sense that no one really disputes it. The ideal thesis statement would be something that you'd put forward and your reader would say, that's interesting, prove it to me, right? Or if you were having a conversation with someone, you could imagine that happening too. You make a statement and they say, that's an interesting idea. What makes you believe that? Or on what basis would you support that statement? So that's an intriguing thesis. That's a provocative thesis if it's arguable. And it should also be defensible utilizing some kind of evidence, right? So you are going to have to prove this thing, and you need to think about, can I actually defend this thesis utilizing some kind of evidence? Is there evidence out there that I can use to support my claim? So those are the core components of a quality thesis statement. When you craft the thesis statement, as you're starting to write a paper, you want to look at those 3 components and say, okay, is it concise and specific? Is it arguable? And could I defend it utilizing some type of evidence? So here's an example of 2 thesis statements. These are based off the reading Anana in Honors 111. And one is weaker and one is stronger. So I'll read them to you and then I'll talk a little bit about why one is weaker and one is a stronger thesis statement. So the first one, the weaker thesis statement. Quote, "The religious narratives of the Sumerian goddess Anana offer insights that are still applicable today." We'll talk about why that's weak in just one sec. A stronger thesis statement. Quote, "The religious narratives of the Sumerian goddess Anana present a notion of feminine power that aligns with contemporary feminism." So, the weaker thesis statement. That's really vague, right? Going back to the idea of a destination or a journey, imagine that you got in your friend's car and you asked where they were taking you, and they said, oh, it's somewhere in Maine, right? This is a really broad thesis statement. It doesn't provide much information to the reader, and it doesn't provide the writer, you, a lot of guidance in what you're actually going to say. If you were to attempt to craft an essay with a thesis statement like this, you're going to end up with something that's very general and broad and probably will read like a list, right? It'll be these 12 things are the ways in which Anana is still relevant today. That's not the most focused and most compelling form of writing. And, there's a good chance that the reader reads that thesis statement and says, that seems really broad and vague, and I'm not super interested in this. With the stronger thesis statement, it's very clear what the writer is going to have to do in order to defend the claim, and the claim itself is clear. They're making a link between the narratives that we see in an ancient Sumerian text and contemporary notions of feminism. And they're going to have to draw parallels between what we see in Anana and some of the contemporary ideas about gender equality, the roles that women play in society, the inherent value of women, and the ways in which they have been subjected to patriarchal rule, right? It's clear what the writer has to do in order to make that claim and make it compelling for the reader. And it's also, it's a provocative statement. This is maybe a linkage that your reader hasn't thought about before. They might be aware of feminism, aware of arguments about the need for gender equality and changes in reform in society, but maybe they haven't thought about it in relation to an ancient civilization and their notions of the divine. So you have something that's clear what you need to do as the writer, and it's also compelling and provocative for your reader. So hopefully it's clear why one is the weaker and one is the stronger statement here. So there's plenty of resources on the internet about crafting thesis statements. This is one of the most important skills that you can try to kind of nail down early in your college writing career. Some of you will have already had lots of training and practice at this, and some of you will want to work on this. This will be a skill that you try to hone early in your college career. One of the additional resources that I often send students to is the Purdue Online Writing Lab, or OWL. And at this link, there's a specific resource on developing strong thesis statements. There's also the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana campus has the Center for Writing Studies, and they have a good handout and set of tips on crafting thesis statements. So there's lots of resources out there. I'm always happy if you have kind of an idea for one of these shorter weekly assignments, or if you have ideas for a longer paper that you would write in honors, to sit down with students and talk about their thesis statements. Usually that's kind of the first question that I'll ask students when they come to me about an assignment or with questions about a piece of writing. I'll say, what's the thesis statement? What is the claim that you're trying to defend or the argument that you're trying to make? And we usually go from there. So consider me a resource as well. So we'll wrap up there, and your writing assignment for this week is actually kind of the first essay that you'll be doing in Honors 111. So I want to go back just to the core components of a quality thesis statement. The rubric that is available with the assignment, it's the second page of the assignment, lays out the criteria for how I'll be evaluating your thesis statement. And it's basically these 3 points. Is it concise and specific? Is it arguable? And would it be defensible utilizing some form of evidence? So you're actually going to get some practice crafting the thesis statement and get feedback from me this week. So I look forward to reading your essays, and don't hesitate to get in touch with me if you have any questions or any concerns about the assignment. Thanks very much.